Okay, so in this new unit, our main focus is going to be on an idea called speciation. And the root word of this is the same root word as the word species. So we'll focus later on the definition of what a species is, but basically it's a type of animal. And you can think of whales or velociraptors or owls as all being different species of animal. And there's also species of plants and bacteria and fungi as well. Speciation is the process by which you go from one species of bacteria to many different species of bacteria. And this is a really important idea of evolution because we need to be able to explain how all living things could have come from the same ancestors. How you could have gone from something that looks like a crocodile, and that could have become other species that look like brontosaurus and velociraptor, and how those could have become other species that look like the bald eagle and the pigeon. And so this idea of how we create these different species is really important, but before we even start talking about creating different species, I want you to understand that all those things I just listed, velociraptors and owls and crocodiles, even though they might seem really, really different, they actually have way more in common than they do that makes them different. And if you think about, particularly on their cellular level, they look extremely the same. And so we're going to be looking at that. We're going to be looking at the common themes of life, the things that make different species actually very similar. And so the first thing we look at is the fact that all living things use the same genetic material, DNA and RNA. They have the exact same structure. So all the DNA in all living things is in this, what we call a double helix structure, this twisted ladder. And it's all made out of the same parts, these what we call nucleotides. Whether that's adenine or guanine or cytosine or uracil or thymine, they all use the same nucleotides. And just to take that a step further, they also use the same code. So in every single living thing, a code of uracil followed by cytosine followed by adenine is always going to trigger a serine protein to be selected, or a serine amino acid. In every single living thing, a uracil followed by a guanine followed by an adenine is going to trigger the end of protein production. So every single living thing translates DNA into amino acids using the same genetic code. That's pretty amazing. And it's because of that we can take genes in a bacteria and put those genes in an animal like a goat, and that goat can produce that exact protein without making any mistakes because the genetic code is the same in all living things. There are no exceptions to that rule. Another thing that makes them common is all eukaryotes. Right? Eukaryotes are things that have a nucleus. We're talking all plants, all fungi, all animals, even some one singular cellular organisms. The only things that don't have nuclei are bacteria. So all those things, everything that's multicellular, and even some single-celled organisms have chromosomes. This right here is a chromosome. A chromosome is basically a bundle of DNA. And all eukaryotes bundle their DNA into chromosomes that look just like this. So you could take chromosomes right out of a plant and put them into a fungus, and they will fit in, and they'll be able to translate those chromosomes into proteins. Another thing that they all have in common is if you look inside the cells of all living things, or at least all eukaryotes, like we said, plants, fungi, and animals, they will all have the same basic parts called organelles. So they're all going to have things like this mitochondrion in it. They're all going to have these other membranes like this endoplasmic reticulum we see right there. And they also all have these yellow guys, which are called a cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton is what holds all the organelles in the right place and gives the cell its shape. And all living things have the same cytoskeleton and the same mitochondria and the same endoplasmic reticulum, maybe with little tiny changes, but it's basically the same parts to make that alligator as you needed to make a velociraptor, as you need to make an owl, or even a mushroom or a pine tree. They're all made out of cells with these same basic pieces. And so we need to keep that in mind so that we don't get too caught up in the idea of, well, pine trees are nothing like porpoises. But the truth is, they are actually a lot alike. They have very similar parts to their cells. They have the same genetic code. And so it makes it easier to understand how evolution could have created all these different living things when we realize that the basic building blocks are really very similar. The other thing we're going to talk about is the fact that the overall pathways that living things use are very much the same. All plants use the same form of photosynthesis. There's a few little variations, but they basically use photosynthesis in the same way. All animals use the same forms of respiration. So all animals are taking in oxygen and turning it into carbon dioxide. All plants are taking in carbon dioxide and turning it into oxygen. And actually, this is a secret, plants also do this respiration thing. So plants also produce carbon dioxide by using oxygen. Plants do both processes, and animals just do the respiration one. We'll talk about these more later, but they work the same way in all living things. And they also work this way in bacteria, and they work this way in fungi. And so even these bigger processes that use hundreds of different molecules and lots of energy, they're actually very similar between all living things.